Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. My name is Mike Zornick, and today I thought I'd do kind of an off the cuff video recording talking a little bit about some books that I finished reading and some books that I have just started to read and what I'm kind of hoping to get out of them. I'll start with just a general awareness that, like, at the end of the year, you get this like email from Goodreads, which is a platform that I currently use to like track my books. Like what I'm reading and what I want to read. And it'll show you, like, these are the books that you read last year. And for me, I did not really read a lot last year. And primarily that's just due to family, things that came up. The other part is just my eyesight. I mean, not that like my eyes are like awful, but there's definitely a bit of fatigue in reading, and so the first like big change there is like about the end of last year, around November. I went for my like yearly eye checkup, which this was my second eye checkup since like kind of starting that. After I hadn't really been to the eye doctor in a long time, but I did that, and I started. So I got reading glasses, which I just got those like all over the counter. And then I got a prescription for the computer. And the prescription for the computer is different because like reading glasses will have a certain field of view that is like relative to like holding a book, but the computer is like an arm's length, distance away, the display. And so the focal length has to be a little bit different. It's not a particularly powerful prescription, but it's enough that like it makes a notable difference, particularly the book reading. So the first book that I've finished recently is called Testing Elixir, Effective and Robust Testing for Elixir and Its Ecosystem. Show you a little title card right there. I read this alongside with the Elixir book club. I'd actually read the book while it was in beta a while ago, and then I obviously reread it alongside the book club. And I thought it was relatively good. It's a particularly good book at introducing you to the core tooling that is available for Elixir's developers to do testing and to do mocks and like how everything works basically. I did observe, like, working through the book and then discussing the book during book club, that like I personally have like a different perspective on what to test and why to test than the authors, and so there was a little bit of a misalignment there. For a good book on that topic, I'll recommend this, which I plugged before on my blog: Unit Testing Principles, Practices, and Patterns. This is a particularly good book at discussing those like how, when, and why type questions. This book is written, I think, like in C# or something. Language doesn't really matter, but the topics that this book covers is really good as well. But yeah, so Testing Elixir, we read it for the book club. I picked up a couple little things, tidbits here and there. Always looking to improve my testing skill set, and still trying to articulate like my own testing vision. I'll describe it in a summary here, where basically, my perspective is I want to write tests that demonstrate the user's contract with my system. And so the user has this like mental model for like how my system works and what they can do with it. And I'm very much interested in testing and verifying that the user contract is maintained from, release to release. I am way less interested in testing the smaller units or implementation details of the system. For me, if you go into your project with this philosophy that like you need to test every file or every class or module, you're going to be hampering yourself with like just like this weight of unit tests, and it's not going to encourage people to refactor things, because now, like, instead of just refactoring it, they also have to refactor like all the tests with it. And even if like the user contract hasn't changed, like they still have to like redo all that testing, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of weight. And and then their argument is like, well, those tests are much easier to write. They're much faster to run. But I think the value you get from them is not worth the cost. And so again, I like to kind of test things at the user level. And those tests are much more harder to set up and they're much more complex and they take longer to run. But like for me, they more thoroughly validate the system. Um, and yeah, and so those are some testing books. Always, I enjoyed both books, even though I prefer the philosophy of unit testing principles, practices, and patterns a bit more. All right, next up is a book called 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. Little picture there. Yeah, this book came to me. It was on some reading list from a couple different friends or peers. Kind of picked it up out of the blue. I liked it a lot. It's I think the title is a little misleading. It's not really about time management and like the productivity sense. Like, here's how you get more things done. It's absolutely like the antithesis of that. And it's a book more about like the philosophy of time, kind of understanding how you know how finite our lives are, and trying to understand like what you should be working on to like make you happy or be fulfilled. If anything, I feel like you read this book and you decide there are things in your life that you don't want to work on, and so that'll just make time management that much easier. So if you like that kind of like book and that kind of thinking, I would recommend it. It's definitely well done. I think good books are books that don't necessarily try to give you the answers, but try to give you the questions. So like if they can, get you inspired and curious and start to like be self-introspecting of like, your opinion on things. Those are always good books. So 4,000 Weeks definitely falls into that category. I recommend it. So another book I listened to the audiobook, so I don't have the cover here, is The 6 Types of Working Genius. This is a book that was on Audible and read aloud by a voice that I enjoyed in other work. And so it was almost like I really enjoyed his voice. And so I was just looking to see what other books he had read. And this was one, and the content kind of was curious to me. And so it's one of these books that will it's a business book basically. It's trying to teach you concepts to help you, organize and manage your team to be more productive and happy. And ultimately, it does this by giving you kind of like a narrative story, fictional story, and then backing it up with like lessons learned from the story. And ultimately, like this leads to this kind of like Myers-Briggs review of like personality types. And I'll repeat them. So wonder is people who like enjoy speculating and asking about what's possible. Invention, people like love blank canvases to create solutions. Discernment is fueled by seeing and giving feedback on the workability of ideas. Galvanizing is energizing by rallying the troops to get moving in the right direction. Enablement enjoys providing the support necessary to see solutions realized. And tenacity finds joy in bringing projects across the finish line with the desired results. And so the point of the book is basically they're trying to get you and your team to assess themselves and figure out like what of these geniuses they are that they would identify with, and which ones like they identify that maybe they can do it, but it doesn't bring them like happiness or fulfillment or joy. And so the idea is to do this assessment across your team, and then if you can identify the people who are like much more interested in wonderment than tenacity, you can kind of like design the company around those ideas and ideally generate a much more productive team. The overall philosophy, I mean, it seems reasonable. I do think it is valuable to kind of understand like of those buckets, understanding even yourself, like self-assessment of like understanding like I fall into this, I am this, but I'm not that. And then using that knowledge to help like identify like the kind of jobs you want to take in your career. Or if you observe yourself in a job that is, asking you to do something that is not a good fit, then there's a lot of value there. Um, the negative side of the book is as I said, it does this through like this narrative story in the beginning, which is the majority of the book, and that narrative was too perfect. It was very unrealistic. It described a team that was kind of like brought together, and they all they all worked together previously, and they all liked each other, and they all seemed to get along. And like the thing of it is like in the real world, you're going to be put into a business scenario where you're going to be working with a company, and there's going to be friction. Just like some people just don't communicate well, or others aren't, or are just, they're different. Everybody's got different skill sets they bring to the team, and sometimes when you put them all in a box, there's like friction there, and how you handle that friction kind of can really impact how the company feels in my eyes. But the book tells the story, and it's just unrealistic. And it's funny because like I didn't realize it until I was writing my review on Goodreads that the author of this book actually wrote another book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which I had read as part of a book club within Test Double when I was subcontracting with them. And that book was really great. I really enjoyed that book, in its same style where it had this like, management philosophy, and it told a story, and then it kind of like went into the system that it was describing. But the story in that book was much better because like it actually had confrontations and stuff like at the boardroom, like where people were like, we should do this, and like somebody would say no, and then there'd be this discussion about it, and like it helped make the idea a lot more like reasonable to relate to your own work. So for this book, The 6 Geniuses, I would say it's a maybe. 6 Types of Working Genius. I mean, it was okay. The other book by the author, I actually probably would recommend, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Yeah, I'd recommend that over this, but this one was okay. So those are 3 books that I've finished recently. These are a couple books that I'm actively reading. The first one here is called Craft GraphQL APIs in Elixir with Absinthe, from the Pragmatic Programmer. This is a book I purchased a long time ago, and I actually read about half of it a while ago. And this was when I was really just starting to learn Elixir. I thought that I was going to be building a GraphQL API for my project Guildflow. I never actually did, so I never really got to apply it. But I had a contracting gig recently, which didn't really work out, but I had the opportunity to do some GraphQL work there, and it was interesting. And I started reading the book then, and I'm definitely interested in GraphQL for other things, and so I thought I'd finish reading the book, and I'm about 2/3 way through. It's really good, and the cool thing is that even though the book itself is multiple years old at this point, it still tracks, like it still relates to the project Absinthe, and like there's not a lot of like changes that have like drastically affected the book. I feel like if you were to work through the code of this book, you'd get a working app, pretty consistently. But yeah, I like the book. I'm currently working through it. GraphQL is really interesting. This is my first time really getting my head around it. And so understanding what it is, and then how kind of there's like these community patterns from like React Relay and Apollo. Those 2 specific things I'm still getting better with. But the core of GraphQL, I'm starting to feel pretty confident with. And Absinthe is really nice. Really impressed with how well that works, and how nicely it tracks with other Elixir toolkits. So like Phoenix has this concept of plug, and plug works through this like transformation process where like you create this concept like a connection and you run it through a series of transforms, which is how you handle like routing and stuff in a Phoenix app. And Absinthe does the same thing with like the GraphQL, where like there's this like top level and it just works through all these layers and you can kind of like add your own middleware. Works really, really well. But yeah, this book, it's a couple years old, but still holds up. If you're interested in GraphQL for Elixir, I definitely recommend checking it out. There's also a really good video series that the Pragmatic Studio did, which included some GraphQL work, which I also enjoyed a couple years ago. So if you're interested in GraphQL, definitely check those out. My next book, I do not have a physical copy of, is called Modern CSS with Tailwind, Flexible Styling Without the Fuss, by Noel Rappin, which is from the Pragmatic Programmer. I'm reading this for Elixir Book Club. This is our next book. It's actually a pretty short book. The current version is the second edition, which covers Tailwind 3.0. I actually read the first edition of this, so I'm already kind of familiar with it. It's a pretty short book. It serves as a very basic introduction to Tailwind. It doesn't go too deep into styles and stuff. Well, we'll see. I mean, maybe the second edition is different, but like the raw page count is about like a little over 100 pages. I'm not expecting this to last for too many book club sessions. I feel like we'll work through it pretty quickly. But yeah, I'm reading that, and I'm obviously using Tailwind in my own Phoenix apps. I've been using it for a while, and with Tailwind becoming a default for new Phoenix apps with the new version, which is currently in release candidate 3, so maybe that'll land soon. It seemed like an interesting point for other Elixir developers. But yeah, I'm definitely still trying to... I've been using Tailwind for a while, but there's definitely this feeling that like I'm not taking advantage of all the new things that were introduced in Tailwind 3.0. And so I'm hoping this book will give me a nice like introduction to that. We'll see how it goes. All right, the third and final book that I'm currently reading is How to Design and Teach Workshops That Work Every Time. The Workshop Survival Guide by Rob Fitzpatrick and Devin Hunt. Nice little yellow book here. Yeah, so I've read Rob's other books, The Mom Test and Write Useful Books, which were both extremely excellent. Highly recommend both of those. Have not read this before, but it comes kind of at a time when, I'm basically, like my consulting calendar is like wide open right now, and I'm definitely looking for work, but there's definitely this air in the industry right now that like, it's tough. People are getting laid off, and so it's a little bit tougher to get work. And I suspect if I have trouble getting a contract that's like a good fit for me, I may actually end up trying to do like a workshop or two to help, bring in some revenue and help keep myself, busy. And so I thought this would be a good read to do that. It's funny, as I read like the first chapter or two, it reminded me heavily of an internal book we had at the Big Nerd Ranch, which is a company that I worked at for a couple of years, where I taught like week-long workshops at companies. So I would travel to Amazon or Google or TripAdvisor was another one, and I would teach these like week-long iOS boot camps, learning Objective-C and Swift, and then UI kit and the basics of like writing a native like iOS application. And so I did a lot of teaching with that, and so we had a lot of internal tools for teaching the teachers. We had an internal book that we used, and then we even did workshops to teach teachers. And it's fun to read this and see a lot of the same concepts come up, from just like how to structure your day and how to make sure you have breaks and all that fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to this. It's if it's anything like the other two Rob books that I've read, I expect it'll be terse and packed with info. And yeah, I'm looking forward to working through it, and then maybe penciling out a workshop or two to run over the next couple months. that I think could be a bit of fun. It would be a little weird because more than likely I would run the workshops online rather than in person, which is unfortunate. I mean, maybe I could follow that up with like an in-person one at a conference, like Elixir Conf or something. Um, and so teaching a workshop online is a whole different animal, which I don't think that this book really goes into detail with, but it's definitely something that I will probably have to look into through other means, other like videos and blogs or writings. But yeah, the workshop survival guide. Feeling good about it. Can't wait to keep going. So yeah, those are a couple books that I've read and a couple that I'm reading. Yeah, I think books are great. As I said, I'm trying to read more now that I've got my eyesight worked out, and yeah, I find that books are particularly nice because they've gone through an editing process. They've gone through proofreaders. They're they're usually more well thought out. It's not to say that you can't get value from blog posts or even some social media. It's just it's very easy when you're working through those to get very distracted and to have a lot of like low value consumption going on. Whereas I feel like the books are more, it's like, hey, I feel like I might be teaching a workshop in the next couple months. Let's read a book on workshops. It's more valuable to like, your personal goals. And, you get to kind of pick a book and say like, I want to get better at this. And so I'm going to do that. Whereas like if you go online and you just read your blogs or watch social, which I do some, but I try to balance it a little bit more these days to keep it more focused on what I'm interested in. And the key with the book reading is like for me, I prefer physical books. I like having it on my coffee table so that way, like when I sit down, it's there, it's staring me in the face. And just to be, relentless in, filling up the gaps. So like if you're going to go to the dentist, bring the book, read it for 20 minutes while you're waiting in the lobby. Like don't read the magazine that's, non-topical to your life. That's a nice way just to kind of like keep it up. And then also try out the audiobooks. I had a couple audiobooks on this list, and I continue to kind of like put them into my my morning walk time a little bit. But yeah, that's it for today. Kind of off the cuff, but hopefully you enjoyed it. If you're reading a book that you think I would enjoy, let me know. Curious to hear what's going on with you. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.